In Elizabeth, Illinois, a town of only 700 people, stands a restored depot of the Chicago Great Western, today a museum run by the Elizabeth Historical Society. In its heyday, the Chicago Great Western was of vital importance to the economy of Elizabeth. Old buildings like the commercial hotel and post office still stand near the depot, but some things have disappeared, like the bridge across Route 20 and the old water tower, currently a well for the village of Elizabeth. The Chicago Great Western Railway was one of the largest Midwestern lines. It connected 6 major states: Illinois, Missouri, Minnesota, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. This railway was one of the smaller freight businesses of the time, yet it managed to survive for approximately 83 years. However, as innovations in transportation grew, the work previously done to the Chicago Great Western was soon practiced to trucking industries and airlines. By 1968, the Chicago Great Western Railway ceased to exist due to vast increases in operating expenses and revenue downfalls. Since that time, the railway has been abandoned, and today only small parts remain in service. Today, along with our host Audrey, we will be traveling in time to experience the great wonders of the Chicago Great Western Elizabeth Depot.
Hello, my name is Audrey Haskell, and I will be the host today for the Ghost of the Chicago Great Western at the Elizabeth Depot. This is the front patio of the Elizabeth Depot, where you can now buy bricks to put your name on it to earn money for the Elizabeth Museum. These were the old rings that they would come and tie their horses onto that are still here today. There are 2 storage rooms to the building. One of them was here on the side, and this was the other door on the back side of the depot. This was the telegraphy bay on the side of the building. As you can see, it sticks out of the building so that the telegrapher could see the trains coming in and out. This was the entrance to the Elizabeth Depot. I am here in the lobby room at the Elizabeth Depot. This is where the people would come in, and right here is the ticket window where they would buy their tickets to get on the train. This was the agent's office in the Elizabeth Depot.
Well, in the restored telegraphy bay here at the depot, we have a Prince Albert tobacco can inserted upside down in the sounder. The sounder is the device that amplifies the volume of the sound from the dots and dashes as it clicks through the system. And most of these telegraphers were pipe smokers, and their brand of choice was Prince Albert, and by accident they figured out that inverting the empty metal can made a better distinction between the dots and the dashes. And so it started showing up in telegraph sounders all over the country.
This was the telegraphy bay. Right here you can see the Prince Albert can that we heard the story of. Out these large windows, the telegrapher could see out to see the trains coming and going.
The last telegrapher would have been Harry Williams, and he is the person who closed the station November 1st, 1969.
And now we can hear some actual train orders from the 1940s. This is the baggage room in the old Elizabeth Depot, the main room of the Elizabeth Historical Society's museum. This is half the size of the entire depot, so you can see how much cargo was shipped out of here. The Elizabeth Depot was vital to the economic development of Elizabeth. According to the Freight Shipper's Guide of the Chicago Great Western, published in 1897, there was 4 grain and hay dealers, 1 wood dealer, 7 fruit and vegetable dealers, iron workers, 3 creameries, and 1 butter tub producer. The biggest ones were Hoskins Lumber Company, which still exists today adjacent to the depot. Lumber brought in from the railroad to Hoskins was used to build many houses of Elizabeth. People could buy an entire house out of the Sears magazine in Chicago and have it shipped to Elizabeth. The biggest one was cattle. The Chicago Great Western gave farmers a deal that if they shipped enough cattle to fill a whole car, they could get a free ride to and from Chicago to see their cattle sold.
When we were small boys, we used to play down here all the time. Wendell Lewis and I, and some more. We'd play hide and seek here in the freight room. Roy Drescher was the station agent, or whatever you call him. And when the afternoon train would come in, we'd usually help him push the freight wagon in here. And then Roy would always say, after we'd been playing all afternoon, and then after we got the freight wagon in, he'd say, "Boys, I think it's time you went home."
Mostly was back in the 1930s, and things were rough at that time. You know, that was during the Depression, and nobody had any money, and most of the cars were owned by farmers. You know, the town people didn't have cars, so you couldn't go any place. If you went any place, you went by bus. So, and there wasn't anything for the kids at that time. There was no entertainment. You know, you had to do your own thing. So we spent a lot of time down here at the depot, and fortunately we had good depot agents at that time, and they put up with us, you know, and in fact just sort of encouraged us, you know, to play around here. And we were always careful, nobody got hurt, and I was lucky one time that a freight train, the local freight came in, and so I was down here. I always watched for the local freight to come in. I always watched them as they switched cars down here. So the train pulled in there that day, and the fireman usually got out, and his job while they were here switching around was to go uptown and get some lunch meat and sandwiches and so on for their lunch. So he got off the train, he came over to me and he says, how would you like to ride around here in the engine, you know, while I'm up there at the store, you know. Well, that was, you know, like asking a kid if he wants an ice cream cone, you know. And so that started a summer of riding on the train. I come down here every day that the train came in then, and he would always hop off and get me on the train then. So I'd ride around down here in the steam engine while they switch cars around, and so I had a good time.
Wendell Lewis's father, Charles, worked as a section man for the Chicago Great Western. Section Crew 20 worked out of Elizabeth and was responsible for maintaining a section of track that included the Winston Tunnel.
While he was working on the section, occasionally he would be assigned, I think they called him a straw boss at the time, and I was probably sort of a field manager, and that would be with an extra gang that was working down east of here, maybe down around Sycamore or someplace down near Chicago. And what during the summer then, what he would do, he would have us get on this the mail train, which we call the Dinky.
The Dinky was a gas-powered hybrid unit that consisted of an engine, a post office, and a baggage compartment. It was usually followed by 2 passenger cars. This innovation proved to be quite profitable as it catered to the passengers and the mail freight business.
And we would get on that train, and we'd ride down to Sycamore and get off there. He would meet us down there at Sycamore. Then we'd spend the weekend with him, and he'd take us in Chicago to the zoo or to the Cubs baseball game or something like that. So we had a lot of fun.
The village of Elizabeth sits on a hill. A cut had to be made to keep the tracks at grade. A wooden bridge was constructed to span the distance of the cut. Later, a concrete bridge was built to replace the wooden bridge. Finally, the concrete bridge was replaced and the cut filled in for parking spaces.
Above here was where the old bridge ran, and the railroad would run right through it.
Well, I remember the old bridge. It was a wooden structure, and it had a couple of where the vehicles went across, tire tracks. They were metal. They run on metal there. The metal just laid on top of the wood, and there was a fence on each side to keep people from falling off of it. Then when that bridge came out, the new concrete bridge was built and put in there.
They tore down the bridge due to economic reasons.
Well, it wasn't needed anymore, and it was getting into the state of repair, and they didn't want to repair it. So the alternative was, rather than have them turn it over to the village for all the maintenance costs and everything on it, it was better to have them take it out and we'd be done with all that.
Leaving the bridge, we returned to the depot complex. Across the street stands a commercial hotel, which served as an overnight service for the passengers of the Chicago Great Western.
This was the old hotel built in 1894, as you can see, where the passengers would get off to stay overnight.
It's my understanding during the 20s that this route's overnight service between Chicago and Minneapolis was the fastest. They would have left Grand Central Station in Chicago in the early afternoon. They would have come out to Elizabeth by early evening. The train would have stopped here. They would have gotten off, walked across to the hotel, and had dinner. and then reboarded the train for early arrival the next day in Minneapolis. Now all of that changed very dramatically in the early 30s because that's when the rival Burlington route came out with the Zephyrs, which could go more than 90 miles an hour. And they also went to Minneapolis from Chicago. And once that happened, why, the passenger service on this railroad was considerably diminished.
As you walk up the street to the right of the hotel, we meet at the post office.
It was the center of the community, really, the post office was. Everything came, packages, parts, implement parts, car parts, everything came through the mail. And even then, there was stuff came forward with horse-drawn material.
One of the people that took care of the mail was Francis Claypack, and he had that job for a long time. And he would have to come down here at night, and they would string up a bag on the post out here, and the train would pick it up and went through. Now the westbound went through about 11 o'clock at night, and he would snag that bag, and it was just it was letter mail, you know, it was no packages or anything. And they'd stretch that bag up there, and then he would have this arm on the car that he would swing out as it went by, and he would pick up that bag.
The job of the railroad mailman was to deliver the mail across the street to the post office.
He always had to carry a Colt 45 because there was a lot of money coming through. All the bank mail or money for the bank, like from the Federal Reserve or wherever it was, came in big sacks. Coins would come in big sacks, and of course they had to have security.
All right, these are the real post boxes from the post office in Elizabeth, and here we are at the Elizabeth Depot. Do you remember which post box was yours?
Yes, 23.
Okay, and could you open it for us?
Sure, I remember the combination, yeah.
Returning to the depot complex, we can see one of its more striking features, the water tower. From the beginning, there were problems with the water tower in Elizabeth.
Elizabeth sits on a limestone hill, and lime in the water fouls the pipes in a steam locomotive. And so it was causing them lots of maintenance problems. And they, in short order, built another water tower down the line at North Hanover.
Since the Chicago Great Western no longer needed the water tower, they donated it to the village of Elizabeth and currently serves as well number 2. Even though the water tower and bridge have disappeared, the post office, the hotel, the lumberyard, and depot still contribute to the economy of Elizabeth today. Unfortunately, most of the Chicago Great Western has faded into history. Thankfully, the Elizabeth Historical Society has been able to preserve a small corner in the village of Elizabeth. Because of willing people like Wendell Lewis, Jerry Spear, Miles Kale, and Robert Ertmer, we were able to enjoy their memories and prevent them from becoming ghosts of the Chicago Great Western.